In the beginning of one's seeking, it is common for one to be confused when trying to localize the I sense, which prevails all of mind and believes itself to be the reality. But the driving force within will guide one through this, because the statement that is true for all beings is, all beings wish to be happy and to exist without suffering or misery. All beings share a supreme love for oneself. Happiness is this love, and thus one constantly strives for happiness. As is also the case when one rushes daily to enter into sleep, where there is no mind and no misery, but only the pristine beingness of oneself. The principal means for arriving at this happiness of self, whilst remaining conscious of it, is the way of the direct path through self-inquiry of one's essence. Who am I? Is the rhetorical question one should always focus on. One may look and see and say to oneself that the gross body, consisting of transience, waste, change, and decay, I am not. The five cognitive senses, which grasp onto the gross objects of this world, I am not. The forces of action, such as grasping, speech, excretion, procreation, movement, enjoying, etc., I am not. Even the mind who is thinking that I am not, I am not. If I am not these things, who am I? After negating all of the above-mentioned things, that which is left, the awareness, that I am. The nature of the awareness is existence, also known as beingness, consciousness, bliss. One realizes the self when one realizes the non-reality of the world, which is experienced by way of the senses as mind. This will remove the world and thus reveal the seer. But as long as one sees the world as real, one will not see the self. This is because the seer and the objects seen are but a mirage, like when one mistakes a rope lying on the road to be a snake. The fears and measures one accepts in order to avoid the snake are very real, yet they are non-existent phenomena. There is no snake. The reality is the rope, and the substratum of the rope will not arise to be seen unless the knowledge of the snake is banished. Likewise, the snake will no longer arise once the substratum of the rope has been seen to be the only reality. Thus, one should understand that the substratum of self will not be seen unless the belief that the world, which is perceived as real, is removed. When the mind, which is the cause of all cognitization and movement, becomes clear, the reality of what is will arise. That which we call mind is a wondrous power which resides in self. It causes all thoughts to arise. It is nothing other than a bundle of thoughts and perceptions. Apart from thoughts, there is no such thing as mind. Thus, thought is the nature of mind. No thought, no mind. Apart from thought, there is no independent entity called the world. In deep sleep, there are no thoughts and there is no world. In the states of waking and dreaming, there are thoughts and there is a world. Just as the spider emits a thread of silk out of itself, and then again withdraws it into itself, likewise, the mind projects the world out of itself, and then again resolves it into itself. When the mind comes out of the self, the world appears. Thus, when the world appears to be real, the self does not appear. And when the self appears, the world does not appear. When one applies, with constant persistence, the direct path of self-inquiry, the mind will end, and the self will be revealed as the residue which remains. The self cannot be removed. That which we refer to as self is the infinite, non-moving one, the Lord, God, the Master, the beingness, the I Am. The mind can only exist when it attaches to something gross. It cannot exist on its own. This is the independent feeling of the I-mind that we refer to as the subtle body or the soul. So what is the path of inquiry for understanding the nature of the mind? See that that which rises in the body as I is the mind. If one looks to see from where this sense of I arises first, one will discover that it arises from the center, also known as the heart cave or the heart. This is the place of origin of the mind. Of all thoughts that arise in the mind, the I thought is the first. It must arise before all other thoughts arise. It must be the first personal pronoun to arise before the second and third personal pronouns like you or them can arise. Without the first personal pronoun, there cannot be a second or third personal pronoun. mind will become still by the inquiry, "Who am I?" This thought will destroy all other thoughts. And this thought, like the stick one uses to adjust the burning wood of their campfire, will also eventually burn up. And one will then be realized. If thoughts arise, one should not pursue them, but rather wonder, to whom do these thoughts arise? It matters not how many thoughts arise. Each one should be confronted with the thought, "To whom do you arise?" The thought which most naturally will arise then is, "These thoughts arise to me." And then one should rhetorically ask, "And who am I?" If one does so, one will discover that the thoughts will evaporate, the mind will become clear, and it will naturally attempt to sink back into its source. With repeated practice of self-inquiry, the powers of concentration will grow, and the mind will begin to remain within its source. The mind, which is subtle phenomena, arises and goes out through the brain and sense organs. The gross names and forms appear. But when it stays in the heart, the gross names and forms disappear. Not letting the mind go out is called inwardness. Letting the mind go out of the heart is known as externalizing or outwardness. Thus, when the mind, which is the source of all thoughts, stays in the heart, there is self, there is peace, there is happiness, there is bliss. Whatever one does, one should do without the ego of I. When one does so, then all will appear as the nature of reality, or God. Apart from the direct path of self-inquiry, there are no other means of permanent realization. All other means are nothing other than means to control the mind. These means will cause the mind to appear to be at peace, but when these means are set aside, the mind will once again come forth. Because such means are but techniques or rituals that depend on the mind being active for them to work. Like through the control of breath, which will bring the mind to calm. But it will do so only as long as the breath is being controlled. For when the breath resumes on its own, the mind will also arise again to attach itself to all the produced impressions. The source is the same for both mind and breath. Thought is the nature of the mind. The thought I is the first thought of the mind, and that is the ego. It is from that source of egoity that the breath also originates. Therefore, when the mind becomes calm, the breath is controlled, and when the breath is controlled, the mind becomes calm. One relies on the other. Breath is the gross form of mind. Until the time of death, the mind keeps breath in the body. When the body dies, the mind takes the breath with it. Therefore, the exercise of breath control is only an aid to assist in keeping the mind calm, but it will not destroy the ego mind. Like the ways of breath control, equally, meditations on God, reciting mantras or prayers, food restrictions, and such techniques are but aids in controlling the tendencies of the mind and bringing it to calm. Through such techniques, the mind can become one-pointed. The mind will always be wandering from one place to another. It is like when you give an elephant an object to hold in its trunk. It will go along grasping the object, but nothing else. The mind, when occupied with name or form, will equally grasp the form it perceives, or that which it is given to hold. It will grasp that alone. When the mind is allowed to expand into countless thoughts, each one becomes weak on its own and extends to the next thought, and so on. But as the mind becomes resolved by way of the mentioned calming techniques, it becomes one-pointed and strong. Such a mind eventually will have little problem with self-inquiry. Thus, such techniques may be necessary for beginning seekers before embarking onto the direct path of self-inquiry. Of these techniques, the one which is most helpful is the one of food restrictions. One may benefit abundantly from a sattvic diet, since the brain derives its strength from food. Sattvic foods, which are foods that do not excite the mind, are best, as well as remaining on a moderate diet. Such foods include grains, fruits, and vegetables. Red meats, spices, and such are aggressive to the nature of thought, and thus should be avoided by novice seekers. But this is not a requirement. It may only prove to be helpful to the novice seeker. In truth, the self is not concerned at all with the body's dietary issues. Impressions in the mind of thoughts and objects can appear unending, like the waves in an ocean. As the inquiry of self rises higher and higher, the thoughts will get destroyed. You wonder if it is ever possible that the thoughts and images which have been around since the beginning of its time can actually resolve themselves, and that the self remains as the real self. Without ever attaching to such thoughts, one should simply remain firm within the inquiry and see such thoughts as nothing more than disturbances on the surface of self. Even if thoughts arise saying, "I am a sinner, I am undeserving," this is but rubbish, noise, and should be released as soon as it appears. All saints come from sinners, and all sinners may become saints. There is no limitation to self. There are not two minds, one good and one evil. The mind is but one. It are the impressions, which are of two kinds, the desired and the undesired. When the mind is filled with desired things, we call it good. When filled with undesired things, we call it evil. The mind should remain interned and not turned onto external objects or people. Regardless how awful another may seem, one should hold no hatred toward them. Both desire and hatred should always be avoided. That which you give to another, you give to yourself. If this is fully understood, who would avoid attending to others? When the person, ego mind, arises, all arises. When the person becomes silent, all becomes silent. Mind arises with person. If the mind is in its silence, one can live anywhere one finds themselves. Geographical locations or worldly situations are of no concern to self. As long as there remain impressions of objects in the mind, self-inquiry is required. As thoughts arise, they should be destroyed then and there, in their origin through inquiry. If one was to apply self-inquiry constantly, without pause, every moment, this would do to banish the ego swiftly. But as long as there are enemies entering within the castle, they will continue to breach the walls like a raging waterfall. If they are destroyed as they emerge, the castle will fall into your hands alone. The only truth that exists is the self alone. The world, soul, and God are appearances in the self, like the colors of mother of pearl in a seashell. They all appear at the same time. The self is that where there is absolutely no I thought. This is called silence. The self itself is the world, I, and God. All is God, the self. Without any desire, resolve, or effort, the sun rises, and in its presence, all things bloom. Water evaporates, beings perform functions and rest. It is by the mere presence of God that the souls perform their actions and then rest, all in accordance with their respective karmas. God has no resolve. No karma attaches itself to God. Just like worldly actions do not affect the sun, or the reflection does not affect the mirror, or the universe, which does not affect the infinite non-pervading space. The person or ego that dissolves into the self is equal to one who sacrifices self, person self, to God. This is the most excellent devotee. Doing such means to remain constantly within the self, without ever allowing a thought to arise other than the thought of the self. Whatever burden one throws on self or God, God bears them. Why should we constantly burden ourselves with thoughts about what will happen, what should be done, and how we should do it? The train carries all loads. So why should we board the train, yet while seated, continue to carry our luggage on our shoulders or head? Put the luggage down and be at ease, while the train takes you to your destination. As thoughts arise, destroy them at their origin. This is a non-attachment. God and the Guru will only point to the self, but they will not take the soul into the self. In truth, God and the Guru are not different. Just as the prey, which is trapped within the jaws of the predator, cannot find escape, the grace of God or the look or direct words of the Guru will pull the soul towards the gates of self. One will not be lost, but rather the path will become clear, and the soul must gather its efforts to remain there. This will fructify into release of ego. One can know the self through one's knowledge, and not through someone else's knowledge. Does one who knows himself to be John require a mirror to know that he is John? The study of all intrinsic natures of creation is not needed to arrive at the resolution of self. Just like one who wants to throw away garbage in order to make space does not analyze it to see what the garbage is. You do not need to analyze or contemplate all the intrinsic movements within creation to know what you are. Simply throw out the garbage and the space will arise. It are those very moments which create the veil over the reality of self. The only difference between the waking and dream states are that the dream state is short and the wake state is long. Other than this, there is no difference. Just as the happenings seem real in the wake state, so do the happenings in the dream state. Just as in dream the mind takes on another body, in waking it takes on a body, and in both states thoughts, names, and forms occur simultaneously. In order to gain release, the mind must be made still. This is so in all teachings of self-realization. In order to quiet the mind, one must discover what the mind is. How can a search like this be done in books, or schools, or techniques and rituals? One must know oneself with one's own eye of wisdom. The self is within the 5 covers of disguise, the things of perception. Therefore, it is futile to search for self within books and things which are part of the 5 covers of disguise. There will come a time when one will need to forget all the learnings. They will not be of any use at the final moment. Happiness is the very nature of self. Happiness and the self are not different. There is no happiness in any object of the world. We imagine through our ignorance that we derive happiness through objects. But when the mind goes out, it experiences misery. In truth, when its desires are fulfilled, the happiness it experiences is the happiness of returning back to its own place. This causes the happiness, which is the self. When the object desired is obtained, or the object disliked is removed, the mind becomes inward turned and enjoys pure self-happiness. This is because obtaining desire removes the very misery of desiring from the mind and leaves it silent and absent of desire. Thus, happiness prevails for a moment, only until the mind again goes out for another desire. This is like a mouse on a wheel. The cycle never ends. It is the perfect hell. Constant misery with brief moments of happiness in between. Because constant misery with no moments of release in between would only stagnate the soul into lifelessness. The one who knows this will have no problems in locating the self. But the one who is ignorant of this will continue to run on the wheel forever, only staying alive due to the little gaps of hope it encounters in between. That which we call the world is only thought. When the world disappears, when there is no thought, the mind experiences happiness. And when the world appears, it goes through misery. Remaining quiet is what is called wisdom insight. To remain quiet is to resolve the mind in the self. Powers, such as telepathy, knowing the past, present, or future happenings, and clairvoyance, do not constitute wisdom or insight. If such things arise, they are but garments of the soul. Do not be impressed. To be impressed is a reaction of ego. Do not cling to such things. Desirelessness is wisdom. They are not different. Desirelessness is turning the mind away from objects. Wisdom is clarity of mind, thus the appearance of no object. In other words, not seeking what is other than the self is detachment or desirelessness. Not leaving the self is wisdom. Desirelessness does not mean that one must avoid pleasurable occurrences that come their way, but rather, it means that once the occurrence has passed, one does not hold on to it and make it a goal for future occurrences. This is but obsessive mental activity, which we are all too familiar with. We enjoy a moment and then begin to plan in order to re-experience the moment again at a later time. Life begins to revolve around such events only. Inquiry consists of containing the mind in the self, in God. Meditation consists in thinking that one is the self, or God, or beingness, consciousness, bliss. It is the thinking. Thinking must be dropped, and knowing must prevail. Inquiring into the nature of the one who is in bondage, and then realizing one's true nature is the release.